So I have my part here, model space. And then if I'm going to do a drawing, I want to print this out. Where does that happen? Yeah, in my layouts, right? In the paper space. So for this, it's kind of big. I'm going to do it on layout B, right? Because we have our layout A, so 8.5 by 11 sheet. But you can see how much space the title block takes up. So our usable space is a lot smaller proportionally than it is on the B side. So my kind of default is I just do things on the B side. And so if I look, I don't have a viewport already drawn in here, right? Remember I said when you make your template, you can either leave the viewport in there, just make it smaller, or not do it. I usually choose not to do it because I like to be able to select it as I go. So how do I get a viewport to show my stuff in here? So if I go to the layout tab here, you see it's got the little blue highlight on it. That tells me it's a contextual tab. So it only shows up in the context of when it's available. So I'm in the layout, it's showing up that it's there for me. Like if you're in the array command, you get a new tab for array, right? That only shows up when you're doing that. So if I click here, I have some options for doing viewports. I can just make a viewport using the rectangular option or polygonal, or I can convert an object to a viewport, right? Or I can also go to this insert view. And so sometimes I do this, and sometimes I do this. I just kind of pick whichever one I feel like using. If I do the rectangular, I can just draw the rectangle, and now I can double click in here, start centering up my stuff. If I do this one, then I can just select what I want, hit enter, tell where to be. About the same number of clicks. That's why I don't really have a preference. If you make the rectangular one, it's going to show you everything. So if I have a lot of things on in model space and I want to pick out certain areas of it, rectangular kind of makes it a little cumbersome because I have to look at everything that I have to zoom in on where it is. Whereas insert, it kind of lets me do that kind of all at once. But if I only have one thing, I usually go with rectangular. If I have to kind of come up with a logic of why I use which ones, if I have one thing model space, I'll usually just do rectangular. If I have a lot of things, then I'll do the insert view. Yeah. Yeah. And it does, when I do insert view, it does automatically come in at a scale. So you can see it came in at 1 to 5, and it locked that scale automatically for me. So if I want to change it to a different scale, I can go into the viewport, unlock it, and change the scale, or I can just click on it, click the little arrow, and pick my new scale. Okay. So that's the first thing you want to do, though, once you take your things from model space into your layout, make your viewport, get them in there, like center them in the viewport, and then set a scale and lock it. You want to make sure that this lock icon is blue, that it's locked. Because if it's not, and I go into here, now I just messed up my scale, right? But if I set that scale something and then lock it, now when I zoom, even in model space, it adjusts the whole paper. I'm not going to mess up that scale again. No, the model is the model. The model is the right size. So if I go in here and I measure, I still get my 8 inches across there. And in order to change from paper space to model space, you have to be out of commands, and then you can double click to change, or you can click the button here that says model and paper, or you can type PS to go to paper space, or MS to go back to model space. So remember, at least 3 ways to do everything. It is the same thing. So if I draw a line right here, go to model space, the line is there. Because it's just, remember, it's just a window. It's not 2 different files linked together. It is just a window from one area to the outside. Okay? And if I go to layout A and I put a viewport in here, it's going to see that line also because it's still looking at that same thing. It's just another window looking at the same thing. So you can leave the grid on. My personal preference is in model space, I like the grid on just because it gives a little bit of directionality, maybe, and it's not like intrusive. Kind of faded back in the background. But in paper space, it's in there. It's like, hey, I'm the grid, and it's in the way. And so in paper space, I turn the grid off. I don't want to see that. Some people like it. That lets them know where their viewports are. They can see, oh, here's a viewport here, here's a viewport here. So if I want my isometric to be in there also, pick that one, enter, stick it there, and say, no, I don't want it that big. Let me make it 1/8 scale. They can kind of, when they're here, they can see them. But I prefer just turning that grid off. And then you can turn it on and off per viewport. They're not the same. So I can switch back and forth and do that. Okay. What's something else I should do right now? So I've made some viewports. What should I do? Yeah, I should probably make this scale match whatever this scale is. So just add my text. Oh, no, 1:4. Go. Oh, mine is not text. Something else that I'm going to show you later. But yeah, so adjust that. There we go. But what else? What's another thing I should do? Nope, before I even get to dimensioning. Move that around. So remember our layers? We got one called viewport, right? So if I go take this right now and I print it, I preview it, it's gonna be like that. It is taking my line thicknesses and everything. But I've got these boxes there around my views. Is that standard? Do we put boxes around our views? No. And so that's why one of our viewports, one of our layers is called viewport, right? So if I pick on those and I put it on that viewport layer, they become a little bit, I made it a gray color, so it's not super bright anymore. But when I print, remember what setting we picked for it? Now it doesn't show up at all. Because remember when we set up our layers, for the viewport layer, we told it not to print. So we can see it, we don't have to turn it off. So don't turn off your viewport layer. Yeah, if you turn it off, then you can't move it around or anything. So leave it on, but have it on that viewport layer so it doesn't print. And this is where we do use that color over here or one of these colors. So we want it just to be a light shade of gray, right? We use this color, the white, that it gives black on white background, white on black background. It'll switch. Any of the other ones stay that same shade of gray no matter what the background is. And so I usually just pick that one, the 9. So that way I can see it, but it's not in the way. But if I need to adjust it, I can just click on it, grab it, and move it over a little bit. Okay, give myself some more space. Right? Does that make sense? Same thing here. Maybe I'll make this one a little bit bigger. And the isometric doesn't have to be the same scale as the other views. So I've made my part, and now I need to dimension this thing. So the paper space is our piece of paper itself, right? Model space is where our part goes. Where do you think dimensions go? Are they part of the title and these things? Are they part of the drawing of the thing you drew? They're part of the thing you drew, right? So they should be in model space. Let's see. So I'm in paper space now, and I go to measure. Oh, look, it kind of bounced me down into model space, but it's measuring the size of that box. But if I do a distance, this is where it kind of gets a little tricky. If I click these 2 points, it gave me 8. I used the measure thing, and it gave me 8 because it knew I wanted to measure those 2 points. But if I do distance, I measure these 2 points right here that are above it, then I get 2. Because now I'm measuring the distance on the paper. But if I use the O snap, it knows that I'm snapping to the corner of the part, and I probably want to measure how wide the part is. And so it'll give me the actual width of the part. So like if I put it, before I click, it says 2, right? But as soon as I click, it tells me 8. Because before I click, it's measuring, oh, you're measuring how far on the piece of paper. So I could be measuring how far is it from that corner to that corner. And then it's going to tell me how far that is on the paper. But it's like here, it's like, oh, you're measuring from one thing on the same viewport to the same viewport. You probably want to know how far it is in the actual part. And so that's something that changed sometime in the last 5 years. They kind of made that subtle change. So sometimes it can be really confusing. Like I've got this measurement here, I move it a little bit, and then the whole number changes. Because some people, some crazy people, dimension in paper space. So they're in paper space, they put the dimension there, and they do all their dimensions because they think, that, oh, dimension is annotation is on the paper. So they think it should be on the paper. And so they do that, but then they decide, oh, I really want to put it on layout A. Guess what? Yeah, because their stuff is on this layout, not because that's not part of that, right? But if it's in model space, then I can pop it into a new viewport, do whatever, and it's there. It's automatically there. Remember, we also talked about when we made our layers or our styles, we made sure they were annotative, so they don't change scale based on what the scale of the viewport is. If you're meant to dimension in paper space, that wouldn't be a thing because it'd just be the size of text on the paper, right? And so that's kind of another hint. Like others, like where you should be doing things. And so there's a few ways to do it. Kind of my preference is I just do it here in the layout through the viewport. So I double clicked it into the viewport, activate the viewport. You can see it's active here. It has my scale picked here. So now when I do my dimension, and I'm going to make it easy, I'm going to go to the dimension layer. That way it's automatically adding stuff to the dimension layer. And now I can dimension, pick my points where I want it to be, and it puts it in. Okay. Pick my points, up where I want it, move it, and whatever. Okay. So I can go in. Now it's probably where we'll make this really big, work on it, and then size down my viewport later on. Yeah, because remember we went in and adjusted, and mainly the only change we'd make is we want our text size to be 0.12. The arrow size can be either 0.18 or excuse me, or 0.12. If I do that, you can see the arrow is going to get a little bit smaller. That's okay too. But 0.18 is what it should be. But a lot of people make it a little smaller just to make it take up less space. And then the units. So the primary units just change it to 2 places, and turning off that leading 0. I think I told you to do that on the template. So that way, if we have smaller ones, it's not there. So you can go just to a dimension here. You can also right here, if you have a specific type of dimension you want to use, and you don't want to have it try and automatically guess what it is, you can pick from here. If I just go to the dimension wizard here and I pick the line, and the line, it's automatically going to give me the angle. If I just pick one line, it's going to give me the length of that line, right? But if I move over, just like in Fusion, SolidWorks, based on where I move it, it's going to give me the horizontal, the full length, or the vertical. Nope. So if I do so it won't give me the hole because it's going to want to go to the center of the hole. I can't pick on the circle. With this one, I have to go through and tell it that I want to use either the radius or the diameter option. Okay, so diameter, pick the circle, come out, and it just gives me the measurement. So if I want to put 4x here, what do you think I need to do? Double click on it. And then it's highlighted right now. So what happens if you type and something's highlighted? It goes bye-bye. Oh, actually, dang it. Actually, it was on the left. It used to make it so it highlighted that section. So it made a little change in 25. So you might be able to see the cursor blinking just on the left side. It used to be that it would actually highlight the text, and then so you'd have to press the left arrow to move it to the left of it before you start typing. But it looks like they fixed that finally. Yep. So if I do hit delete, it goes away, and I can type whatever I want. Oh, why do I just get a bunch of symbols? Yeah. I need caps on. Now I get letters, right? So if I hit delete and erase that text that was there that it measured, it goes away. How do you think what should I do to get that back? Oh, I mean I could, but if I just want to add it back in right now, if I want to say use what you measured, what was it in Fusion? The greater than symbol, and then less than. So let's see, greater, and then I do the less than, or less than first, less than greater than, whatever. No. Left pointy, right pointy. And so put those back in, and it adds back in the thing that it measured. Okay. So, but I would just say, 4x space that. Okay. And if I click on it, you see it does automatically stay pointed at the middle. Okay. So if I go in and annotate, I do have some other options. If I don't do that one, I just do this one. Here, I have the option of doing baseline or continuous. So if I do baseline, I pick the side. Now I can pick that one. It's going to space them out for me. If I pick continue, right now, it's going to continue whatever the last one I did. If I want to pick a different one, I can just hit enter, pick the other one, and now it's going to continue that one. Move dimensions around, you just click on it. I've got my grips. This one controls the text. If I move the text up and down, it moves the dimension line, and the arrows up and down with it. If I grab here, it's just going to move it up and down, but it does give me a little bit of moving the text also. Just I'm not holding text directly. If I move the grips, changes the measurement. Yeah. So when we're dimensioning, so remember, I'll put my checklist for dimensioning rules here. One of the rules, is that we have the extension lines come from the part up, and we have the dimension line that has the text and the arrows and stuff. You can't cross the dimension line. So dimension line here, we don't want to cross that. So for those of you that had drafting 10, what were the other rules for dimensioning? Yeah, so you want to stay off the object, right? You want to stay out of the object. What's the next one? That's more of a technique thing than rule. Okay, well, let's get there. So out of the part is one. What's the next one? Dimension holes where they're round, right? But also out of the envelope, right? If I dimension it, for some reason, here. That's inside the envelope, right? So if I made a box out of this, if I just did a rectangle from there to there, that red box is the envelope. We want to be outside the envelope. So outside the part, if you can't do it outside the part, this part's pretty hard to fit it in the envelope, but sometimes parts there's, you know, like a cutout or something like here. People want to put dimensions here. So you want to be outside the envelope. Right? Yeah. And so there's times we can kind of fudge those. If it makes it look better, then you can break those rules for placement. But we want to dimension holes where they're round. What are some of the other ones? There are arrows pointing to the center. That's going to be taken care of automatically here. What about hidden lines? Did I dimension hidden lines? No, don't dimension hidden lines. Right? That's one of the ones you can't break. If you have something that's hidden lines that you want to dimension, what do? Make it into a section, right? Which we'll do in here later on. What about what's the minimum number of dimensions for a view? 1. Because unless you're using that view for the sole purpose of making another view, you don't put a dimension on it, you probably don't need it, right? And here, since you're having to draw your views yourself, try and figure that out ahead of time. Don't spend all the time making a view and be like, oh yeah, I don't need this. That's kind of like, oh. In 3D, it's a little easier because it's a couple clicks. But here, you spend all the time projecting and making a view just to realize, yeah, I didn't need to do any of that work. It's kind of crushing sometimes. I've done that at work, like an hour into doing something and be like, yeah, I shouldn't have done all that. So, but where should we put dimensions? Model space. Okay. That way it's here. If I go back to this one, oh, it's not there. Any idea why it's not here? There. Not here. So we're using annotative dimensions, right? So what is it linking? What is it kind of connecting to make sure it's right size? The scale factor, right? So if I go to that 1:4 scale factor, boom, there it is. Even if I then change it on accident. So it's meant to show only at that scale factor. It's only at that scale factor it shows right. If I make this 1:2, then that wouldn't be the right size anymore, right? Or 2:1. The other way. Oop. If I turn that same one on, it'd be too big, right? So if I click this button, I can see it at the same size, and that is way too small, right? So if I go 1:5, you can see now it's going to scale up with it, but it's not. It should be the same height as the text down here, right? This is 1/8 of an inch text in our title block. So that should be the same height. But if I just do this now, it's changing the size, but it's not locked to the scale. So it's not using that. The one thing I could do though is if I click on it and right click and I can say annotative object scales, say add current scale, got a little bit bigger, right? And now I can turn off the show all scales. This one is now showing the correct scale, and I can move it around. And look, I can see behind it the version of it that's for the other scale. I can see that it's smaller. So this one, because the scale is 1:5 instead of 1:4, it's a little bit bigger. If I go into model space, I can see that one there. If I click on it, I can see both options. I can also here, and right now it's set because this right here, the show all scales, is turned on. And that by default in model space, that's turned on. I could turn that off until I only want to see them for things that are that scale. I can only see things for that scale. And so even though I'm in model space, I still have an annotation scale option down here in the title, or in my status bar area, to see the scales at certain things. So I could set my scale here, be like, I know I'm going to make this half scale, and do all of my dimensioning here, that at half scale, and then when I go to the viewport, it's already there. But I usually don't know what scale I want to use until I put it in the viewport. So the isometric is still drawn at the same size, and so just in the viewport though, I just make another viewport. Like here, I've got one viewport for this stuff, and one viewport for that. And usually we don't dimension isometrics. I do in the isometric module. I am going to show you how, but usually we don't. Usually we do it for like making assignments. That's the only time I ever do it. But sometimes if you're showing something to someone that doesn't know how to read prints, then you might dimension isometric because it's a little easier to see, but not for the actual shop drawings. More of a presentation kind of. Yep. And it'd be the same way. So still in model space, either pure model space, but I usually, like I said, prefer to do it in the viewport. So that way I can see how it's fitting on the paper and everything. And so while I'm here, I can move this view, right? This is my side view. I can move it if I want to, right? Can I move it down here? Yeah, I can move it and keep it lined up. Okay. So I can do them in the same viewport. Should I make this in a separate viewport? Yeah. Sometimes if I've got other stuff going on, or yeah, so let's I've got a file that I'll show you that has like a full dresser in it, and so it's got parts that are all drawn where they should be in the assembly, but on the pages I need them to show up. So I could, move this way over here, make this viewport be just this one view, and then do a new viewport for this one. Put it back on the viewport layer, make sure that it's the same scale, right? But is it good? What's wrong? Not lined up. How should I line it up? So I could draw a line here in paper space, and then move it from that corner to that corner, right? Or I could use tracking to do the same thing. There's also another command that you do it by picking on stuff in the viewports, but I think that's easier than doing the other way. The old school way was called MV setup, and you could pick on viewports and align them, and that was meant more when we were doing like making views of 3D objects in here. But it's kind of a cumbersome. This process, I'll just like draw a line in paper space, move things, or use tracking and make them line up. Okay, they're supposed to line them up. Now I can have this viewport here and dimension it on its own also. And then if I need to move it, just make sure I move it sideways and don't go up and down on accident. Yep. Question? Okay, so I just put it there. Just move. I can't pick it. Why can't I pick? Yeah, because I want to move the viewport, right? Pick the viewport. The viewport's the window. I don't want to move my parts, because if I just make a big viewport and I move this stuff down, is that good? Well, why not? Yeah, because if I do that, now it's not being lined up here anymore. So I want to go here, move, and I can grab that point there, and then I can just come over here, just hover over that so it turns on tracking, then track over until it gets there. Okay. So that's another option. Another option is I just take this viewport this viewport, and I make it big. So that way it shows everything. And then I just take one of the corners, right click on it, and say copy, and I move it over. And I pick back on the original one, and I make it short again. And now I've got that copied one here. I can now. So, and I do that sometimes. There's, like I said, there's a million ways to do things. At least 3 ways to do everything. Find what works for you, and sometimes what works in one situation, you decide to do it a different way in another situation. But knowing the tools lets you have the option of how do I want to do it right now. Okay, does that make sense? Any other questions? Did that answer? Yep. So same orientation as normal. And probably the easiest thing is just one viewport with all your views right there in that viewport. And if you want a second one for if you want ISO at a different scale, then make another one for the ISO. Otherwise, you could have one viewport, just the whole thing. I'd probably, if I was going to do just one viewport, I'd probably have it go from like there to there. That way, it doesn't go over the text. That's the annoying thing. You try and double click on text, and you click into the viewport. Now you can't edit your text, and it starts to get annoying, right? So I can pull that in there. Just have one big viewport there with all my stuff. That works too. So lots of options, and I won't know how you did it. The goal is for me not to know how you did it, right? Because the only way for me to know is if you have your viewports turned on, which you're not supposed to. So other than that, I'm not going to know if things aren't lined up right. Like, did you draw it out of alignment, or did you use viewports that weren't lined up? But if you do it right, I won't be able to tell how you did it. Question? Okay. I knew you were going to go there. I knew that was going to be the next one. So you can see this right here, my center mark. It's kind of ugly. This is one of the things in AutoCAD that we struggle with, especially on small circles, or circles that are small relative to the dimension size. Because if it's a big circle or a bigger scale, you can see it's smaller there, right? Smaller there. And so in the dimension style, that is being created because on the lines tab, symbols and arrows, it's set to mark. We have an option for a line, which will, if the circle is big enough, put a line all the way out on it. But it has to be bigger than like right there. And we don't have a whole lot of control over that. And so one thing we'll a lot of times do is go in and turn that off, say none. It goes away. And then we can use the center mark command. We just pick the circle and it puts it in. But like the scaling on this is not so great. I have a video. Because the scale of this is set on not necessarily with the scale of the drawing. So if it's a 1-to-1, we use that, then it looks okay. But if you're at another scale, then it kind of messes it up. And I'm going to have to remember what kind it is. So it used to be an easy thing, and they changed it, I think, in 22, 23, they changed it. Let me double check. Let me find the video.